Hey guys, Matthew here from the mmatt YouTube channel. I put out a video recently describing some of the upgrades that I've made to the plane recently, and some of you guys have asked me for some more information on it, and I figured it was much easier to simply make another quick video describing them and giving you some more information on them than it would be to actually type out a response, because to be honest, it's much easier to show you than it is to type it out and explain it that way. Let's start with the Propeller. The Propeller is a solid carbon fiber warp drive. That's the name of the company that makes it, and that's upside down, but I'm sure you can read that anyway. It's a warp drive, and it's got nickel leading edge protection, and it has the reputation of being one of the most rugged propellers on the market. It is ground adjustable. You simply loosen off the bolts here, and these ones as well, of course, because this is just two pieces of aluminum plating that's clamping it together. So you loosen the bolts, and then you can just twist the blades, and there's a protractor with a bubble level in it that goes on the end, and so you can adjust your prop pitch quite precisely, in fact, which is really nice. So that is the Propeller. You can see it's a very simple design, just two composite clamping blocks and a bunch of bolts and some spacers inside here. Some of you may be interested to note that I also have a balance master installed on the plane, and what it is simply a very thin disc that gets installed between the prop flange and the propeller itself, and the rim of it is filled with ball bearings and mercury. And so whenever it detects any sort of vibration, the ball bearings and mercury actually move to the side of the vibration, and it actually cancels it out. So apparently it is quite effective. I haven't noticed a huge difference, but any difference at all is good, even if I don't notice it, because less vibration means less wear and tear on the engine. The only thing that you should note is whenever you put the warp drive propeller on, these bolts are normally on this side. I had to reverse it because the bolts were too thick. They were coming into contact with the rim there, so I just reversed the bolts, but that's not a big deal. The fuel tanks are a little bit more complicated because of all the plumbing and whatnot to make it work the way I wanted. I found pictures on the internet of some guys who have done it this way. So I just simply drill two holes in the tube itself and then put a U-bolt, and you can see I've got some clear fuel line on there, and that's to protect the strut. And I've also taken some rubber fuel line and split it and put it in between here and the strut as well, so that whenever I clamped it down there would be some friction there without actually bending either of them. And I've got some Gorilla Tape on there too, just for some good measure. So I think I did a bit of overkill, because that's a 1/8 thick wall. That's definitely thick enough. It didn't need to be that thick, I don't think, but I figured stronger is better, right? Lightness is, of course, very important, but I figured I didn't want that falling off or bending. The fuel tank itself is just simply bolted on, so I drilled holes into the tube here, and then used some saddle mounts in between, and then just used an AN bolt to put that in. And that's a similar setup to how the new Beaver installs theirs, except theirs is on the jury strut itself. The plumbing, now, again, I wanted simple. So my seat tank is originally the only fuel tank I had, and so the fuel line came out and it just went straight up into the fuel pump, which is located up here, then went down into the carburetors. I didn't want 3 on-offs. I didn't want 3 fuel tanks. It was just going to get too complicated. So I simply ran the strut tanks, and the reason why I want the strut tanks to be my primary is because there's no fuel gauge on the dash, so I can just look to my left or look to my right now to see how much fuel I have left. You can see I've got some witness marks there. That's 1 gallon, 2 gallons, and 3 gallons, and I've got that on both tanks. I do also have it on my seat tank, but I had to lean way out from the cockpit in order to look back to see how much fuel I had left. And it was a bit of a pain in the butt, so I stopped doing that now, because I don't have to worry about it, because I can just look and see how much fuel is left. Fuel pickup, so there's a line right to the bottom, and it comes out here and down. I have an on-off valve here, and then it goes up, and it's mirrored on the other side, and there's where they're joined, and then it comes out into my fuel filter, into my fuel pump, and then into my carburetors. So I can, as you can see, I've got just over a gallon on this tank, and if you can see over there, I've got 3 gallons on that one. Now, I did have exactly 2 gallons in each tank when I parked it, but apparently I'm on a slight slope here, and the fuel siphoned out of one and into the other because I didn't turn off the on-off valves, which is not a big deal. While I'm flying, I can reach from the front seat to these on-off valves, and I can turn them on or off. So this one, I've burned quite a bit more than I've burned in this one, so I can turn off that valve and stop the fuel from this tank until I burn that one down to the same level, and then I can turn this back on. So that is my primary fuel system. But I didn't want to waste all the gas that I can carry in here. I mean, there's another 8 gallons that I can put in this tank. So I hooked this up. This is a simple 12-volt fuel pump. And the fuel now comes out of here, goes through the fuel pump, so the fuel pump sucks it out. It's being dropped down here, up to the front. There's a split there, and it goes to each tank. And so this fuel line comes up, and it goes into this fitting. And this doesn't have a pickup, this is just drop off. So the fuel comes out of the seat tank and gets dropped into the strut tanks. So while I'm flying, when I'm getting low on gas in the strut tanks, I will simply turn on the fuel transfer pump, which is that switch right there, and it will pump gas out of the seat tank into the strut tanks, where it is then sucked out and drawn into the engine. So I hope that makes sense. On the bottom of each fuel tank, I have installed a fuel cock, a drain cock there. That way I can test for water or drain the fuel once it gets too old, because I don't like to burn my fuel if it's more than 10 days old. Mixed gas just doesn't really last that long. I hope that answers all of your questions. The hardest part was getting the fuel tanks level, and I didn't actually get it right the first time. You can see I've got an extra hole there, and there's an extra hole there because I got the angle wrong the first time, so I had to flip it around and try again. And in fact, if you look at this tank over on this side, you can see I didn't get it quite right either, because I actually had to take the U-bolt out and bend it because I was off by a few degrees. So that's the hardest part, is getting that angle set up just right so that it looks proper. I didn't want any sort of cant to them, not because it would affect anything really. It's just that my OCD wouldn't let me. I like everything to be nice and level and straight. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope that answered all of your questions. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.